Welcome everyone to Living with the Times. Tomorrow is the 23rd of Tammuz, and it is a yurtzeit of a very, very important person, and I want to spend the next few minutes talking about him. It's the yurtzeit of Rabbi Moshe Kordavero, known as the Ramak. And when I tell you a little bit about him, you'll see why he is so important. He was born in 1522 in Sfat, and he died in 1570, also in Sfat, and he's buried in Sfat. So he was 48 years old. In those days, that wasn't so young, but in our day, it doesn't seem that he was that old, but he accomplished so much in those years. By the time he was 20, he was already a known and accepted rabbi by rabbis far older than him. He was a genius. He had mastered the whole oral tradition. But what happened at around age 20, his sister married Shlomo Alkabetz. Shlomo Alkabetz is famous for composing the song Lecha Dodi. And Shlomo Alkabetz was a master of the Kabbalah, and he turned his brother-in-law onto the mystical tradition, which he had not been exposed to up to then. And he became totally engrossed in the learning of Kabbalah. And he opened one of the first yeshivot that was for the study of Kabbalah in Sfat. And he wrote a very, very important book called Pardes Rimonim, the pomegranate orchard. It's a phrase from the Song of Songs. A pomegranate orchard, Pardes Rimonim. And why this book is so important is that until he wrote this book, the study of Kabbalah, I'll just use modern terms, was kind of like here and there and everywhere. There were many, many different opinions. The Zohar had been released for the public for a couple of hundred years. Many, many people had a very difficult time understanding the Zohar. And the Kabbalah was thought of as kind of very ethereal, not very organized. And the Ramak took all the different opinions of different issues in Kabbalah, and he organized the different ideas in this book in a way that changed Kabbalah from this esoteric kind of learning into something that was very actually logical and graspable. And he also dealt with a lot of the differing opinions, and he explained them, and he really made order in everything. At this point, there's two different versions, but he became sick, and it was clear to him he was going to pass away, and it was clear to the students that he didn't have much time. And they said, Rabbi, who's going to take over for you? And the two versions are, we'll see in a second, but he said, I can't tell you right now, but I will tell you two things. One is the person who takes over for me, it will appear that his teachings are very different than mine, but you should know that when you really, really study what he has to say, he doesn't disagree with me. We're on the same page. And the second thing is you'll know who it is that when I'm being taken to my burial place, the one who sees a pillar of illuminated cloud following my casket, that will be the one who will take over. And so he passed away. And here come the two versions. One version is that the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, probably the most famous Kabbalist of the Tzfat era, some say he came 6 months before the Ramak passed away, and he actually sat in his yeshiva very quietly. No one really knew who he was, understood who he was. The other version is he came to Tzfat the very day that the Ramak passed away. So what happened is they had already dug the place where he would be buried, and the entourage was taking his body for burial, and they were about to bury him in that spot, and the Arizal, especially according to the version that he had just showed up in town and no one even knew who he was, he said, "You can't bury him there." And they looked at him, "What do you mean we can't bury him there? We already dug the grave." He said, "But that's not where the pillar of cloud is. The pillar of cloud stopped over there." And when people heard that, they remembered what the Ramak said. And sure enough, they listened to him and they went to the place where the Arizal said, "This is the place to bury him." And then they buried him. And afterwards, the students came and they practically fell at the Arizal's feet and like, "Please teach us, please teach us." Now, the amazing thing is the Arizal passed away just a few years later, and in 2 weeks, on the 5th of Av, when we get there, we're going to talk about him also. But the place that the Ramak is buried, the Arizal is buried right over him. They're virtually buried together. And to the right of the Arizal is Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz. So all three people that we talked about in the story, they are all buried together in the very, very famous cemetery of Tzfat. And every time I go to Tzfat, which is usually at least once a year, I always will go and pay my respects and pray and open my heart there. So one thing I just want to say before we end, that if the Arizal would not have come to Tzfat then, we would probably talk about the Ramak like we talk about the Arizal. The Arizal changed Jewish thought forever in so many different ways. But we should remember that the one who, in a sense, paved the way for the Ari in Tzfat was the Ramak. And so we remember him, and his memory should be for a blessing.